Welcome to Dreamweaver Stories, where dreams come alive through inspiring journey. I'm your host, Jenny Jinju, author of Dreamweaver and entrepreneur who built over $100 million business from a humble beginning as a nanny. I know how scary it is to dream big and how hard it is to make those dreams real. On this show, please follow me traveling the world to meet incredible women, dreamweavers, who have turned their visions into reality. Together, we will share their stories to inspire women and younger generations to dream boldly and walk their path with courage. Because when we dream together, anything is possible. Welcome back to Dreamweaver Stories. I'm so excited to introduce today's guest, my amazing friend from YPO community and a true game changer in the fashion and retail, Alexia Crawford. With over 30 years experience, Alexia has built incredible brands like Lala Row and Alexia Crawford Inc. Now as a CEO of LCL Consulting, she's using AI to revolutionizing the fashion world. So Alexia is not just visionary entrepreneurs, she's a champion for women and empowering others to dream big and make it happen. Alexia, welcome to Dreamweaver Stories. I cannot wait to share your journey.
Thank you, Jenny. Happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Hi. So what did you really sparked you in the first, to start your first business? And looking back, what was the scariest leap you took in the beginning, and how did you, push through that fear?
Okay. So I moved to New York when I was, I think, 21, and that's when I started my first business. I moved here because I met a guy in London, and he said, "Want to come to New York?" And at 21, I was like, "Sure, that's amazing." So I got on a plane and moved to New York with him. He was a little bit older than me and had sort of a whole life and a structure here. And I sort of moved here and was like, "Oh, wow, I don't have anything. So what am I going to do with myself?" I wasn't allowed to work or anything. So I was like, well, I'm going to start my own business and see what happens. So my family in Australia, so my dad had a business basically making findings. So think like anything like a zipper or buttons or like the materials you use to make jewelry. And he sort of was like, well, why don't you make some jewelry? And honestly, like I was a history major at school, I'm way more pragmatic than creative, lots of things. But I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I started making jewelry and selling it sort of locally through craft shows and different things in New York. And that was how I started the business. I mean, it obviously evolved, and we'll get into that a little bit. And in terms of like a leap of faith, I mean, I think I moved to a country by myself at 20 years old with no network whatsoever, and just took a huge leap of faith that it was going to work out.
So what is one moment you feel like, oh my God, is something stuck? You say, okay, am I gonna make it? Or something is really scary in the beginning of the business?
So in the beginning of the business, this actually probably was not the most auspicious start in the beginning of the business. So I started making jewelry, was selling it at craft shows. About a year into it, I was like, oh, I'm going to try a trade show. So we did a trade show at the Javits Center. And one of the first customers we got was Barney's New York, which that's a big customer, right. Which was so exciting at the time. And, being sort of 20 and very naive and not really knowing how things work. Probably in hindsight, I probably should have known this, but I didn't. So they gave us this big order for, it wasn't that, now it's not that big, but then it was like a $35,000 order. So as a 20-year-old with no business, $35,000 felt like so much money. So we literally killed ourselves making this order. We didn't have any production set up. We were sort of like making it ourselves all night long, and we shipped it, and we were like, wow, this is great. And about a week after we shipped it, Barney's filed Chapter 11. Not so amazing. So when I think about, now that I've sort of been around the block a few times, I would have checked their credit, and I would have wondered why a company like Barney's was giving us this order, and there would have been a lot of things I would have done differently. But at that time, I just was like, wow, that's not great. It ended up not being terrible. At the time, we were able to sell the debt to like a vulture fund, and they ended up giving us 80 cents on the dollar, and we got most of the money back over probably the next year. So it ended up not being like a total disaster, but it was certainly a different first lesson in business.
That's definitely some bumps. So growing, a brand to a multi-million dollar success is not easy. I mean, you probably did a few of this business already. So what is your biggest aha moment like that really helped you to scale?
Biggest aha moment. I don't know if this is an aha moment, but I mean, honestly, for us, like when I started business, it just went really, really well. That Barney story aside, it was just like, we started this, we had two divisions of the business. One was a wholesale. This is when I was like sort of in my 20s and 30s. One was a wholesale, and one we decided we were doing the wholesale. We were going to start this retail brand, Lila Rowe. And I think like we opened it, and honestly, it felt like we opened the first one on the Upper West Side, and it sort of felt like a nightclub. It was very weirdly popular. Like we had lines around the corner and like people queuing up to get in. And, it was like a jewelry store. It was, so I think in terms of an aha moment, it was like, oh, wow, this is exciting. I mean, we ended up with that first store, we ended up at about 45 stores, and we had 9 of them in New York. So I think when you're young, you kind of just go, yeah, I can do whatever. I certainly felt like that.
Like a fearless.
Like, like I'm fearless, like I could do this. It's like going to be fine. I think that, but it sort of like in my career in business, you kind of occasionally, especially when you're in a product-based business, you occasionally like hit on something where you're just like, oh, wow, I have something.
To the mompreneurs too, because there's a lot of the mompreneurs in the community, and they just feel like, they didn't start it, the business yet, but they wanted to start the business while they have the baby. What would you say to them? It's kind of like sometimes a lot of, I think women or in the whole society, you could be either being a mom, you could be an entrepreneur. It seems like a combined is so difficult. So what do you say to them?
I mean, I actually think, when you're being, at the point that you've got children, I mean, when they're really young, it's very hard. But like when they're at school, you do have a window of like, time where you can work on a business or work on yourself. I think it would be just like find something that fits in with your life. Like, I think people do businesses for different reasons. Some people do it because they really want to grow and, build a huge company. Other people just want a second income. So I think it would be identifying why you want the business and what you're doing it for, and then just really making sure, I think it goes back to what I was saying about like what I'm doing now. Like to me, my number one thing is I want flexibility. Like I'm not saying yes to anything that ties me to being in a specific place for, any length of time. I want 100% flexibility. So I think a lot of moms, that's also true. And then I also think the work culture's really changed. Like there's a lot of opportunities now where you can work from home, or you can, like it's not like when we were younger, it was like you either went to an office, you started a business, or you were a mom. I don't think the world's that simple anymore. I think that, you just need to sort of really dig into what works for you and works for your life and what you want and go for it. I mean, there's nothing stopping, there's so many different avenues now. I would say just go for it.
Do you have the daily habit that keep you like, the energy, the grounded, or, keep you going? Right.
And that was definitely one of those moments. So in terms of aha, I think it's like I've got something here. I can run with this.
Right. Wow. So let's talk about that's really amazing. That's many stores you have. I think there's so many brands like now would wanted to like people like waiting in line for that kind of like crowd.
Yeah, I would want it now as well. It doesn't always.
But so let's talk about the dark days, right? So was there ever a moment you thought about walking away, this is too hard? And if there is, like, what stopped you?
Sure. I mean, I think there's been plenty of those moments. I mean, on the flip side to my career, I have 3 children, and I had my daughter when I was 24. So while I was kind of growing this business, I had like 3 small children under 5. So, that's obviously, it's sort of that work-life balance is definitely a struggle. We had, offices in China. I was in China probably 4 months of the
Mm-hmm.
year. So like in terms of balance, I think that was difficult. Yeah, and then just, like when we grew the stores, we had no clue. I mean, we really
Mm-hmm.
genuinely, you kind of hit on something and you're like,
Just
oh wow, this is
learn
amazing. And we
along.
kind of
Yeah.
funded it all ourselves and grew it, but we really
Mm-hmm.
just had no clue. So like, after it, was up and running and we were growing it, we had to really step back and like put a lot of the infrastructure in from behind. Like we
Mm-hmm.
didn't start it as a brand. We didn't start, we just started like, oh, this is what we're doing like on a wholesale level. Let's throw it in a store and see if it works. And it
Mm-hmm.
did. I mean, it was kind of scary. I mean, it ended up,
Mm-hmm.
we ended up, it was probably in my, late 20s, had 3 kids, had a business with, I think what, like 1.5 million in payroll
Right.
and, another 1.5 in rent. It's
You
kind
wake
of
up
like,
with $3
oh,
million
wow.
in your head.
Yeah. And like without the proper infrastructure and, we learned a lot as we grew, like on our own, like we had
Mhm.
to learn everything. Then I also had the wholesale business at that same time. So yeah, it was probably a lot at the time.
So it's like, now with a lot of, we call mompreneurs, right? Your mom, you're an entrepreneur. It's really, I got a lot of questions from the Dreamweavers community. And like I say, okay, I just feel like it's so overwhelming and it's just like doing this. And what is like, some tips or from your shared experience, say how for all these moms to going through this, dealing with all this chaos, the overwhelming, and the sometimes is really the guilty. You wanted to be a good mom, and you have so much demanding from the business.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I was so young. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
like I said, I had my daughter when I was 24. So by the time I was 31, I had 5 kids under, 3 kids under 5, sorry. And I think when you're that young, you kind of just go. I had a really good support system. I had
Mhm.
my actually ex-husband now was a really good, he was a CFO of a bank, so he had his own job, but
Yeah.
he was very, very supportive with the kids and the life and all that sort of stuff. He had a lot of help with nannies. Like we had an au
Mhm.
pair that lived with us, and we had a nanny that came in during the day, 9 to 5. So we really like structured it with a lot of help. I don't know if I felt guilty. I think I just,
Yeah.
like I really go back to just being crazy young and just like I had my daughter and I went back to work in a week.
Hmm.
And then, it didn't totally work out. I mean, I went back in a week and 10 weeks in, I
Yeah.
got really bad postpartum depression and it all just sort of whacked me in the head. So it definitely wasn't easy. And I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm not, I don't beat myself up. Was I the best mother to young children that anybody possibly could have been? Maybe not, but I was a good mother and they had like the support and love they needed. And I have great
Mhm.
relationships with my children now. So I think it's just sort of cutting yourself a little bit of slack. And,
Yeah.
I know it's easy to feel guilty, but like,
Mhm.
everybody does the best they can and no one's perfect. And,
Right, right,
sometimes you have sort of like these, epic failures and that's okay.
right,
Like
right.
we all do our best. So I kind of, I really go back to just being young and not, I think if I had done, like if I had waited until I was in my mid 30s or 40s to have children, I probably would have been a bit more structured and thought about it a little bit more.
Mhm.
Like I did crazy things with my kid. Like my little one, my youngest, I took him on a 6-week trip to China when he was six weeks old. Like I really just thought I could thought I could do anything. And I remember
Right.
getting back from that trip and sleeping for 4 days straight. I just was like, oh God.
So I think it's like, from what I hearing is really the one of the most important thing is like asking for help, have a good supporting system is so important because like, a lot of time I think as a mom, we wanted to be everything, everybody everywhere at the same time. I think that supporting system and asking for help is so important. Another thing is like, I feel like I can feel like you don't really give yourself some compassion. I mean, don't like, thinking about it. Oh gosh, I'm the worst. Go to China too. So I sometimes feel, oh my God, you come back, you see like 6 weeks later, you missed it. Oh, he's crawling. I didn't see that over the first crawl. I didn't see the first this. I missed the first that. So you're starting like kind of like put it really hard on yourself. I used to be so hard on myself. So it's like, I think it's one of the thing is really important to give yourself. Don't
Yeah,
be
I
too much
definitely, I mean, I remember
expectations.
like when the kids were little and we lived in a town in New Jersey that was a sort of an upper middle class town,
Right,
and most of the moms were incredibly educated but didn't work.
right.
And one mom said to me like one time, "Oh, you're just like a man. Like you're not like a woman at all." And that's still, I mean, this is at this point probably 20 years ago, and it's still offensive. Like I
Yeah.
just was
Oh.
like, I'm not, but I'm me, and I have the same feeling about my children as you do. I just
Right,
choose not to parent same
right,
way. So like. I think that was always difficult, just sort of trying to find where you fit in, like
right,
in
right.
terms of I work, I have children, I want to be in both worlds, but I'm sort
Yeah.
of not, I was never really in the mom one because I just wasn't there enough. And
Hmm.
when I left that town, I don't have like a big group of mom friends from that town because I just
Hmm.
wasn't part of it. But my
Right.
husband was, so he did. So I don't know. I mean, there's no right or wrong to that stuff. I think you have to just follow, what works for you and what makes you feel good. It doesn't really matter about the noise from other people
Yeah.
because it's your life and you have to live it.
Right, right. They all say now, like behind every successful woman is a tribe of other women cheering her on. I knew you are such a big champion for women. So why do you think women need women friends and in their corner, like both in the life or and the business? And what does that like that's supporting each other like to you?
Yeah, I think that like I sort of mentioned when I was younger and sort of growing my business, I didn't have a very strong supportive group of women. There just wasn't
Hmm.
that, like kind of what I said, there wasn't that many women
Right.
doing what I was doing. So as I've sort of got older and have more time, I like really believe in giving back to women and like
Hmm.
supporting each other and lifting each other up and having more women in the room and all of that sort of thing. I think people that have, women have the same set of parameters as each other, like in terms of family and kids and expectations and kind of sharing your shared experiences and kind of your goals. And also to my second half of, business and life, if you want to
Hmm.
call it that,
Hmm.
women have become such a valuable, actually like kind of a joy. I mean, knowledge as well, but joy. Like it just
Hmm.
makes me feel good. And I want to kind of, I think we've talked about it a little bit, but like I don't feel like I had a woman mentor when I was younger. I really feel
Hmm.
like I figured it out on my own. And,
Hmm.
90% of the time, if I was in a room, it was with I would be the only woman in it.
Hmm.
And I sort of got to the second half of my career where I'm not that person anymore. Like I walk into a room and there's 20 other women and it just
Yeah.
feels so much better.
Fun together.
It like lifts me feel better. There's a lot more shared camaraderie, experiences, business knowledge. I think it's really important to build that network. And I think there's a lot more opportunity to do that now. Like there's a
Right.
lot of ways to build a network as a young woman that I don't think existed when I was really starting out.
So how does that, like, that fearless Alexia of today, approach the business different, like, than Alexia just starting out?
I mean, I'm a lot more cautious, truthfully, now. I'm not as hungry. I think when like I sort of said it, when you're young, you're just kind of like, well, let's just see what happens. Like, there's not
Hmm.
as much to lose. I'm a lot more measured in what I say yes to now. I want to make sure that it's something that I want to spend my time on. I think it changes as you get to a second, I mean, you're also in that stage with business.
Yeah.
So I don't have to say yes to everything anymore. And I don't. Like I really
Hmm.
pick and choose what I want to do. And I think that that is the main difference. And I kind of like, to me, I want to have a lot of flexibility in
Right.
in my time. Like I want to
Right.
be able to, work from another country if that's what I want to do. I want to, so to me, I really make a lot of my decisions around the flexibility
Hmm.
and how much of my time something is going to take. And also too, like, am I going to personally, get something other than money out of it? Like, money's obviously nice, but like at this point in your career, you're like, what else am I going to get out of this if I'm going to spend my time on it?
So is it kind of like the interpretation of like what is a success? I think change evolving over the years, right? When you start the business, and then now I think you seems like you all pick and choose really what's the priority, what's the most really make you feel like fulfilled. Like,
It's definitely more about fulfillment. Also, too, I've always struggled a little bit. Like you probably hear my voice, but I'm Australian. So I grew up in Australia, and Australia has this very sort of, like you never say you've done anything great. Like you're always like, so you always tend to be very self-deprecating, like very like, oh, I'm sort of, I've done some things. It's a very different cultural kind of thing, like American. So I think like I've always struggled with that. I wish I could be more like self-promoting and feel better about, like I still, if someone asked me, what have you done? I'd be like, a little bit of this and that. Like I'm very, I
I
never
think
ever
that
feel
I
like
didn't know
done.
Australian culture has that, but I felt that is a culture for Asian culture. It's the same thing. When we grew up, you don't talk about your success. That's bragging. You don't talk about your struggle. That is a shame. So that's very, big in the Asian, especially China, the tradition. So I think that's kind of like so important. Like when you're talking about it, you don't really, when you started, right? And even when I started, you don't really hear a lot of, the inspiring stories from women. So that's kind of like, I'm so appreciative from the beginning. You are such regarding the Dreamweaver stories, right? So it's like, what do you think, why it is so important for women to share their journeys, the good, bad, ugly?
I think it's always really important to be authentic and real. Like I could sit here and just say everything for the last 30 years has been amazing and I would be 100% lying. I always think that, when you get to know someone well enough that you really hear their stories, there's a lot
Right.
of good and bad. It's not all like a straight line. And I think it's just important to, if you can help someone else just with like your experience to like, navigate something they're going through a little easier. I think that that's definitely important in terms of giving back and also to like, I've done a lot of, like a lot of times people will say to me, oh, like I'm sort of working with my son in my business right now. And some things are so easy for me that I often forget like how to explain it. Like, because you sort of, like just from even like, really basic, like dealing with your accountant or dealing with like,
Mm-hmm.
a lawyer or whatever it is, like you have all this knowledge of experience. And I think imparting that on like, whether it's just a recommendation or whether it's like, this is the pitfalls or this is what you should look out
Mm-hmm.
for, or, there's a lot that you do over 30 years that you don't realize you do that you can share with other women and younger
Mm-hmm.
people as they're sort of thinking about things. I don't know. It's interesting because like, if somebody told me not to do something when I was 20, I would have been like, whatever. I'm not going to not do something because you said it. See, now I'm like, oh, maybe like if somebody's got a reason that this isn't a great idea, I should listen to it. So I think it's good to get like both sides of the fence and perspectives and everything as
Mm-hmm.
well.
So it's like, I feel like when, especially in this community, I'm starting really talking to a lot of the women who just starting out and they're still like trying to figure out a lot of things. They feel it's hard for them to asking how help, or is it just feel they're not like that big enough yet, even like how to go through their struggles or where they can get in the mentors. I think I think as like someone who paved your path to success, like advice will you give?
I have something and I still live by it today. And
Yeah.
I'm like, to me, it's like if you don't ask, the answer's always no. If I was giving anybody one piece of advice, I'm like, no matter how uncomfortable it is and all the rest of it, just ask.
Right.
Like, 9 out of 10 times people are really happy to, help, give suggestions, give
Hmm.
feedback, give
Hmm.
direction, give experience. So I would really just, when you're starting out in your business, like ask whoever it, like
Yeah.
whatever if you think something's ridiculous and you're uncomfortable and don't want to ask, just ask. Like, and if someone says no, that's okay. Like, who cares? Like, they don't want to do it. Like, I always view that. Like, I'll reach out to anyone if they ignore me. I'm like, okay, it's not for them. Like, I really try
Right.
not to take that sort of level of, like take any of that personally.
Right.
And just sort of just, you know, like not
That's
everything's
such
for
a good
everything. And
trait. Yeah, it is. I think it is like talking to so many women, like, sometime I ask, I think including myself, it's very hard for me to asking for help. I think it's, of course, now it's getting better, but I think in the overall, I think women, one of is just like, asking for help. It's what's the worst answer you get is no. And if you don't ask, you're never gonna have. I think that's so true. I think that we should encourage all the dreamers, just like, just sending the email asking for help. That's another thing I knew you are so, you're such active in the YPO community, and the YPO is such, I think, a special part of your life, of mine too. So what really drew you to the community in the first place?
yeah. Well, I mean, I've been in YPO for about 18 years. So I initially joined because my brother-in-law was a member in Chicago, and he was like, "Oh, you qualify for this now, you should join." And I didn't really know what it was, truthfully. I mean, yeah, I think when you're younger, especially, I think it's changed a little bit now. The whole networking thing is really important and really encouraged. When I was in my 30s, it was just nothing. I mean, I think I joined YPO when I was 34. There really wasn't any, like, I was in EO before, so I kind of had that experience. I outgrew that pretty quickly just because I wasn't at the same life stage. Like like I mentioned before, I had my children really young, and the company had got a little bit bigger, and I just sort of like, I didn't have like a peerdom thing. I like really didn't know where to go with questions or asks or any of that. So YPO, sounded attractive. Truthfully, when I was in, the thick of running a company, traveling all the time with 3 small children, I didn't give back as much to YPO as I did now. I just didn't have the time. But it's always been like an invaluable resource in terms of knowledge. Like just the
Right.
group of individuals we get to talk to just has such an amazing wealth of knowledge. So I think that's been number one for me. I mean, my business never really lent itself to like getting actual clients from YPO. So it's always been about like knowledge, and the people, I think, has probably been my number one thing. And I was thinking something else too on the ask thing that we were just talking about, that somebody gave me this advice, and I think it's very applicable in YPO. But, if you give somebody something specific they can do for you, then they're very willing to help. So like when you're asking for something, and in YPO, that's been sort of very helpful advice, like that if you say to me, "Oh, I'm thinking about starting a podcast," I'd be like, "Oh, that's great." But if you say, "I'm thinking about starting a podcast and would you like to be on it?" I can say yes. So
Yeah.
like I think like being very specific in your ask of people, especially in your networks, and giving them a way to help you is a really, somebody else mentioned that to me that was a business consultant. I was like, "Oh, that's actually a good way to think of asking for things, like how specific can I be, and how can I give this person an ask that they can say yes to." And then back to YPO, I mean, like as I've sort of changed, this transition period in my life, it's been invaluable. It really has. I've put a lot more into it in terms of time and commitment, but it's changed, it's really, the YPO has made a big thing over the last 3 years to bring in more women. And so my experience in YPO has really shifted from sort of it being a very, I was in a forum with nine guys and me. Now I'm in a forum with 6 women and 3 guys. I, have a lot more of a interesting network in terms of social and even business. So I think it's a great, I mean, obviously I think it's great, but you do too?
Yes, I definitely, the one of the things, if you say I regret, if I would say, I wish I joined the YPO 10 years ago. I always say, I'm starting my like Eat, Pray, Love chapter. So I don't know if you watched that movie.
I did. I hadn't read the book.
I didn't too. I didn't watch the movie and read the book. So let me ask you something fun. So if you could take a year to explore, reflect, and reset like Eat, Pray, Love, right? What 3 places would you visit and why?
Wow. Firstly, I love to travel. It's like a total passion. So I've been to 69 countries and I have a very distant, vague goal of trying to get to at least 100 by the time I'm 60.
But you're gonna
So
have a few more on your pocket in the next, I mean, like next few
I
months.
am. I'm getting a lot off this year, actually. But I absolutely love France for the food, the culture.
Hmm.
I'm Australian, I mentioned, so I like the beach. So I think if I was doing the Bali part, I'd probably do that in the south of France or something. Not like in a big fancy thing, but just
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
just, just on the Mediterranean, simple life with simple good food. Pray, I've spent a lot of time in India over my life, and I think I probably try to do something a little bit more mystical and out of my comfort zone. So I think if I was doing the praying part, I'd probably spend more time in India and just sort of explore things I
Mm.
don't know enough about. And love, I have to say New York because my husband's here. If I was to say anywhere else,
So what is like, how do you find the moment of the stillness or like a clarity when the life feels like more chaotic?
I truthfully, I kind of have grown to like my own company. I mean, I
Mm.
genuinely, like when I was younger, I would be like, oh, I can't be by myself. It's awful,
Yeah.
And as I've got older, I'm like, sometimes I just need to be by myself. Like, I just want to, like, spend time by myself. And that could be like at home reading, it could be going
Hmm.
to a movie. Try to meditate as often as I can. I'm not always amazing about it. I like to do yoga, so. I think for me, the reset is just sort of, being by myself, and being comfortable with that. And that took a long time, truthfully. I think when I was younger, I really was uncomfortable with it. And now I'm like, oh God, a day by myself,
It's so good
amazing.
sometimes.
And truthfully, the other thing I actually really genuinely, when somebody cancels on me now, before I take it, I would be so offended. I'd be like, I gave up my time. Now I'm like, oh my God, I just got half my day back. That's so great. So
Oh my
I
gosh.
try, I just think
I
you
know.
get to a different point in
I
life and you
totally
just,
get it.
yeah.
All right, so another thing, what is your favorite movie or TV show that you could watch on repeat?
Okay, it's a really daggy. It's probably daggy is an Australian word, but really uncool. I like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and the Sound of Music.
Which version?
The original ones, of
Original
course.
one. Wow, that's good.
Very uncool.
It's
I don't
like
know. I think it takes you back to your childhood and like
right.
those memories. And I'm just like, I think I've watched Charlie and the Chocolate Factory 100 times and The Sound of Music a few more. So.
The other day, I think I told one of my friends, I said, my favorite movie is The Lord of the Ring. And one of my like really on my bucket list, I needed to visit the place, the Shah on the Hobbit where they live. I was like, I really wanted to go there.
I have been to the Austrian mountains.
And Rivendell. So another thing, what's the book that has inspired or changed you the most?
I read a lot, so I just give one specific thing. I liked all of like Milan Kundera and Unlightness of Being and all of his stuff. So that's been something that I like a lot. Right now I'm reading something. It's basically about it's called Let Them. And
Let
it's
them.
basically a mutual friend of ours posted something
Is it
over
Mel
New Year
Robbins?
where she was saying, kind of meet people where they are. And I thought, oh, that's intriguing because I think
Yeah.
a lot of, we build up a lot of somebody doesn't do something the way we think they should, or so, whether it's a family member, a business, or a friend. And
Yeah.
so I thought, oh, that's really intriguing. How do I, how do you do that? So I just started
Mhm.
reading that book. I listened to a ton of podcasts, a lot of boring business. And then what else? And I really, so I'm a sap at heart. I love Jane Austen. So if I had to pick a book, Pride and Prejudice is probably my
Oh,
number one.
oh gosh, I love that. I love that movie too. Probably the book's better. So I know there's a few things, but one of the thing you already said something, really that one piece of advice to the dreamers is so important is really how to is ask, just asking, and more important is be specific. What are you asking for? So I think that's very important. I think it's in the Dreamweavers community, there's so many dreamers would be so inspired by just, all these your journeys and also all this, you have been talking about how and, I think it's just so valuable. What would you say to these dreamers who is just like in the early stage, they just start, they have so much like, to look forward to, but is sometimes they stuck.
I mean, honestly, I think just, I know it sounds really easy, but like just do it. Like, what do you really like? I think when you're in that younger half of your life before you really have real commitments, like, why not just do it? Like, what do you have to lose? Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? For most people, you end up back on your parents' couch or something. It's like, you've got this whole world out there. And, I also like, I really always think like, I want to like live my life. Like, we only have one specific life and I want to get as much out of it as I possibly can. And for me, it's not things. Like I want, obviously I want to be comfortable and all that good stuff. But like for me, it's experiences and living life, like and get out there and travel, go out of your comfort zone, do things, say yes, if it's a business, start it. Like okay, so you fail. Lots of, I think we live in a culture in America where failing in business, you can look at our current president, is fine. It's 100% fine. Like, lots of people are not successful and it doesn't mean, it means you didn't find the right, I think for like, if I've had 10 great successes, I've had 100 failures. And I'm okay with that. Like, not everything works. So, like, I think it's sort of cut yourself some slack, just go out and do it. If you're not successful, figure out how to tweak it. I think that would be my advice if you're young. And take advantage of being young. Because you kind of get to a point where you don't feel that way anymore.
But when you think about it, like I always say, if you're gonna tell a truth to your younger self, what would you say?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like nothing lasts forever. Like it really doesn't. Like you think it does. Like you have small children and you think I'm going to be a mom and raising kids forever. And then you get to the other side of it and life completely changes. So it's kind of like, like you're not going to do the same thing forever. So even though it feels like you're so in it at the moment, it's going to move on and it's going to change and it's going to evolve. And so like sort of not like try not to feel so acutely like anxious about what you're doing at one given point in time, because you will not be doing that forever. And I think when you're younger, you sort of think, oh, I'm putting myself on this trajectory and this is my life. But that's just not true. So I think I'd think about it like that and give yourself the space to sort of, be in the moment, but not like be like, this is forever.
Yeah, it's so true. And then now, like, you look back, when you are 20s, 30s, oh gosh, there's just so many things I feel like I can, save a lot of gray hairs, to tell you a lot of things. But it's like, but one of the thing I want to like kind of you summarize something. What is it like you can share some the habit?
I do try to meditate because I feel like I just feel better. Like when I like wake up in the morning, if I just take 15 minutes to myself and like meditate, that has made a big difference and just makes me feel more grounded. And it's not, I don't really see myself as being super spiritual. It's just that time in my own head where I'm just not thinking and not doing. I try to be fairly structured in my schedule. Like it's on my calendar, it's on my calendar. I don't double book myself, make 3 plans. I'm like, this is what I said I'm doing today. This is what I'm doing. And so I try to, and then I also make time to like go to the gym, work out, see friends, chat to my kids, spend time with my husband. But for me, it's sort of like, taking some time to myself and the structure. Like I just feel like I need my day, and I'm not a super structured person, but I feel like if I know what I'm doing every day, that helps me plan better and I just feel less stressed.
So what is it that your guilty pleasure when you feel overwhelmed?
My favorite thing to do is I go to it's a restorative yoga class on Sunday night, and I lie on the floor for an hour and have a nap. And then when it's finished, they do a sonic meditation and I lie on the floor for another hour. And that is on every Sunday at 4:30 and I love it. So that's one of them. And then the other thing I do, which I have done for about 10 years, which is a little life-changing to me and very self-indulgent, I have a masseuse come to my house once a week for a massage. And that is 100%. It just That's actually amazing. Those are my two guilty pleasures, but really like time just to be in my own head where I'm not thinking about other people. Because I think we
Yeah.
sort of, like I still am actively running a company. I got married again. We have 5 kids. I have a husband. So I always feel like there's a lot of demands and asks on me from other people. And
Yeah.
I think just that time to sort of be like just with myself and not thinking about what I can do for anyone is sort of
Hmm.
my big reset.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like I wish I would have told my younger self just like that.
I think when you're younger, it's harder because you kind of like, I don't think you give yourself the space or grace to just say, I have to
Yeah.
take care of me. You kind of like, I have to do all this, but you get there.
Yeah, oh gosh, constantly learning, and I love this. You're so good. That's what I like about it. I hate like it's too serious. You do something. Feel I think this is just like a chatting because the next time maybe we should have some drink, something, and then we can do that.
Make it more of a like
Yeah,
Jenny eats.
that'd be
I don't know.
awesome.
I mean, for me, I always really try to be authentic and myself. Like you
Yeah,
can't, like when you're sort
I
of putting
know.
on a lot of graces and airs and you're not authentic and you're not naturally you,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think it resonates with people. And, I also, one other thing I think as I've got older, I don't care if people like me anymore. Like it's kind of okay. You don't have to
Yeah,
like me.
yeah.
Like I like me. And that's, that's sort of
That
what
is,
matters.
I think
And
it's so
be,
important.
yeah, be yourself. Like it really just be who you are and you'll find your people and the people that, want to be around you and resonate with you. And that's
Hmm.
so much better than like trying to be something else for other people. So
Yeah, yeah. I think most of the time, I think is really we're torturing ourselves, like really just by judging ourselves, like from other people's expectation.
yeah. And then I
It's
think
the,
also too, a lot of, we think about ourselves a lot more than other people do. So
yeah,
why, it's wasted energy to sort of.
right, right. Thank you, Alexia, for joining us. This is so much fun.
Thank you for having me, Jenny. I had a great time as well. Really appreciate it.
I'm sure that all the Dreamweaver community, they will love your story. I love it.